What we quickly realized is the kind of people that we're attracting as an organization all came from diverse backgrounds. And every time we'll huddle up together to try to figure out what's the next thing that we need to build, right? What's the next service that we need to think about how to shape? Just being able to tap into different life experiences and journeys from people with diverse backgrounds, what they bring to table, just brings about innovation in ways one could never expect.
Welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
You have a diverse and inclusive work environment? Well, my hope is that you're thinking about what that really means. If you have a small company, you're probably thinking about, hiring your friends or hiring the people you know, and it's more comfortable. But I know that when you have a company that is scaling, you really want to have diversity of thought. You want people to feel included. It really is and makes for greater innovation and more power and growth in the company. Today, we look at D&I that drives growth. Our special guest is the CEO of Givelify. They were on the Inc. list this past year, and we talked with Wale Mafolasire. Hopefully I got that right. But Wale and I have a really good conversation about diversity and inclusion and about what that really means inside of an organization. He shares a story about how better outcomes come when he's able to take different perspectives and see different perspectives. And it only took him reaching out to people that don't think like him. Think about that for a second. And he was able to find a way to build a platform that has scaled to where it is today. And that's just one example of how diversity and inclusion is driving growth for him. Now, my hope is that you are a strong enough leader and you're courageous enough that you know that having a diverse workforce, diverse in their color, diverse in their political alignments, diverse in their ways of seeing the world, and diverse in all aspects, sexual orientation and beyond, that you are going to have a better company. Because if you can actually lead these kind of people to align around these difficult times, which is part of what's inside this, the challenges of that, you will have a better, stronger company that's willing to last the test of time. And I hope that you are thinking about that as you begin to grow your company. Diversity and inclusion, D&I, drives growth. That is today's topic. Now, before we get into the interview, if you are curious about your own journey as a leader, if you have something that you know that you want to shift, you feel like it's something that's holding you back, let's have a chat about it. I am a leadership coach. I help companies grow. I work with CEOs, founders, and their teams to figure out how to lead more powerfully. If you want to kind of get in on that a little bit and just have a chat with me about your business and get a plan, then it's actually no cost to you. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Inside that call, we will have a chat about what's really going on in your business. I have a chance for you to get real with me, not recorded, just a private conversation, and I'll help you get more clear about where you're going, and you can leave the conversation knowing exactly what to do next. And that is powerful. I know it because I've lived it, and this is what I do day in and day out. I know how powerful that is. Just go to genehammett.com and schedule your call. Now, here's the interview with Wale. Wale, how are you?
Doing well, Jen. How are you?
I am great. We're going to have a great podcast. We're going to talk about diversity and inclusion as it relates to the growth of your company. But before we get there and dive into your stories and whatnot, tell us about Givelify.
Yeah. So Givelify is the leading online and mobile giving platform in the world. And I often tell people this as the founder and CEO, I feel like it's my right to say that we are the leading online mobile and giving platform out there. But what makes my job really easy and very confident in saying that is you go to the App Store and you look at the numbers, the download numbers, you look at the reviews and what everybody's saying about our platform. You get to see that a product that's just truly loved and trusted for empowering people to do more good. And we've been around for about 8 years now. We help almost 55,000 organizations, over 1 million people who are giving over $3 billion to these organizations as part of their aspirations to be more generous and put more kindness to the earth.
I'm kind of curious. I think there's a lot of advancements in many different industries, but what does the next 2 or 3 years entail for the giving platforms that you can tell?
That's very interesting. So we've done a lot of research on Givelify, and one thing holds true regardless of the technology platform, that innate to every human being is the desire to do more good. it's innate to you, it's innate to me. I often talk about, I wonder if I got a chance to maybe interview Mother Teresa before, who by a lot of accounts, a lot of people say she was the epitome of giving of oneself for something bigger than herself. If we asked her, she probably would say, look, I gave it all, but there's still more I could do. You look at all the billionaire philanthropists that are out there, the Warren Buffetts and the Bill Gates, and they say, look, we've given a whole bunch of wealth to try to drive positive change in the world, but we still believe there's more that we could do. So that innate desire exists in every human being. Now, the question is, how effortless can we make it to turn that desire into tangible acts of kindness and generosity? And from a technology perspective, we look at the smartphone today, we say it's very ubiquitous. We can't live without our smartphones. And we think there's a lot more that the smartphones can do in being an ally in turning those innate desires into actual actions. But again, you look in the world today and you look at what's happening and how we're thinking about money and the value of currency. You start looking in places like the crypto markets. You start thinking about what could this whole new thing about metaverse look like, right? And there's a lot of interesting things there to explore about how that could play a significant role. Right? You look at what's going on in the news today and the role that the crypto is playing in Ukraine and other parts of the world. You see, there's a lot to be done there. There's a lot to be explored there. So I'm very excited about the future. But I say this to people at Givelify, for us, the medium doesn't matter, right? If it means we have to put a chip in everybody's brain so that they think it in giving happens, that's where we'll be. As long as we're making it effortless for people to act on that innate desire. That's what drives every technology decisions that we make.
I can see it getting a lot easier to give. I know that you see street performers now that are taking, you have QR codes to be able to give. And I know you're working wonderful at a completely different level, but yeah, it's because no one's carrying cash anymore, and cash will begin to probably fade out in many ways inside of our society. But I appreciate the work that you're doing, allowing companies to continue to thrive on the giving model, and that's going to make for a great conversation today. Wale, when our team was researching your company, and it's more than just a fast growth company, but you did make the Inc. 5000 recently, and we were trying to figure out, what are the common elements behind that? Tell us a little bit about your diversity and inclusion program that you see drives growth to your company.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I'm gonna talk my way to answering that question, if that makes sense, because that question is not complete without a little bit of the origins of the company and some of the struggles that, as an early founder and CEO, earlier before the podcast started, as you and I were chatting, Jane, you kind of talked about that journey. And I think for a lot of first-time founders and CEO, you first start with, I'm trying to solve a problem, right? I'm trying to build a solution to the problem. You don't see yourself as a business leader. It's just, I'm just trying to solve a problem. And very much like anybody who finds themselves in that situation, I started with, I'm just trying to solve this problem of, I want to give in the moment, because if I lose that moment, the giving is just not going to happen. And over time, you start seeing that not only am I solving that problem for myself, I'm solving it for a bunch of people. And then your role as the leader starts to shift, right? From I'm trying to solve the problem for myself to, oh my God, I have a product that people are actually using. And this product is actually becoming a thriving company. And that thriving company now employs a lot of people who are counting on you to be a leader to them, right? And every step of that journey, you continue to ask yourself the question is, how do we maintain this growth? And for Givelify, we've had the good fortunes of having been turned down by hundreds of investors in our earliest days, when I would go around pitching investors to try to invest into the business. And that that adversity there actually allowed us to tap into something that we could never have predicted would end up being the secret sauce to our success. What we quickly realized is the kind of people that we're attracting as an organization all came from diverse backgrounds. And every time we'll huddle up together to try to figure out what's the next thing that we need to build, right? What's the next service that we need to think about how to shape? Just being able to tap into different life experiences and journeys from people with diverse backgrounds, what they bring to table, just brings about innovation in ways one could never expect. And I do remember at one of the pitch, while I was pitching an investor, I remember that we got to that slide where you do that competitive slide thing. I don't know, you know what I'm talking about, where you kind of say your product, you give you all the check boxes, and the competitors, you give them the X's. I remember we got stuck on the slide about why one feature was better than the other. And after that meeting, I started reflecting like, hey, look, we're the youngest company on the block. We have the fewest employees. We're not funded. And yet you look at the App Store numbers, we're outpacing all the established players in the space. And for me, the more I reflected in that moment, the more I came to realize that the power of what made Givelify special was not just that we had the best product by all means, but it was the people behind the product that made it the best product. And when I try to unpack what's behind the people, I could almost draw a dotted line to diversity in the life experience of each person on the team. And that's what allowed us to unlock innovation in ways that it's not, that in my own opinion, served the growth of the company. And so the journey for us to making that list is one that's fueled by definitely the diversity of our workforce, but the goodwill of the community on our platform as well, right? The people who give to these organizations and the organizations who are being good stewards of these donations and championing different causes. But when you look in that community, what you also find is a very diverse group of people who are motivated and who are championing different causes. And so as much as I talk about diversity is key to driving successful companies, one of the things that I also like to point out is never underestimate the spirit of generosity in the American population. It's the other thing that has driven the growth of Givelify.
I want to dive into one of the things you were just talking about. Diversity and inclusion drives innovation. Is there a story or example to a feature set that has come about because your team had this diverse group of people discussing and solving a particular problem? Is there a story that you can share with us around that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's the first story of what were we going to build as we're trying to tackle this problem. When I think about why I started Givelify in the first place was based on my own experience of sitting in church and trying to give to my church, and the electronic giving options that my church offered me at that point in time were just, I had to memorize this password, this long URLs. Had to do it on a smartphone, which was not mobile enabled. It was just too clunky. And so I started to try to solve this problem for the use case of somebody who only gave to the Christian faith. Now, when I called my good friend from college, Hari, who was Hindu, and I was like, Hari, has this ever happened to you? You're sitting in church, like, Wale, what do you mean? I'm Hindu, I don't go to church. But I could relate to living in the streets of Chicago, coming down from my condo and trying to go into the street and just seeing somebody who's homeless there. And I'm trying to see what else can I do for this person, right? I could relate to being born in this hospital in India that was established by missionaries. And how do I continue to support that hospital, even though I live in the United States right now? And immediately you start to see like our perspective to how we're addressing this problem starts to be shaped from a worldview versus a very narrow Christian faith perspective where I had started the journey initially.
Now, Wale's just talking about giving to a church. I remember 11 years ago, I met someone when I was in between my other job and being an executive coach in a bookstore. I was trying to find my way in the world. Yes, 11 years ago. And I overheard someone talking about working with a church and they needed to figure out their digital marketing strategy. And I felt like I could add some value. So I introduced myself. We had a conversation. I ended up working on that project for a full month. And one of the things that we had to look at was the giving options. And there was a lot of resistance to people putting in credit cards to give to churches. And it was something that we had to look at it. And we also had to look at how to streamline and reduce the friction of giving within the organization. And that was the very first project that we were able to add and move forward for that client. I share this with you because it takes a different perspective sometimes. People were in resistance to that. But looking back now, it's just commonplace. And this happens all the time. How do you speed up that level of thinking? Well, you have to be open to new things. You have to be open to change. Most people aren't. They want to just keep doing what they're always done. I bring this up because I want you to be a leader that can inspire change and inspire people to embrace it. Back to Wale. I love the story because it makes us all think about, getting in other worlds and taking other perspectives. How do you lead this company of diverse people? What are the principles that you have found really work for leading the kind of growth that you guys have had?
Yeah, very interesting question. And sometimes I wish I had a manual or a book that I could read and say, because we often talk about the journey to achieving a diverse organization. But with a diverse organization comes the complications of also how do you harness the diverse perspectives and be able to channel them into a common purpose, right? And so one of your podcasts I was listening to earlier talks about the whole employer brand, which I think is part of this also, because in that employer brand, you start to think about what's your common purpose as an organization and how do you start to align those different diverse perspectives to champion that in a very holistic way. I tell you what, it's not easy. And we've gotten it wrong sometimes, quite frankly. And I tell people when they advocate for diversity, I'm like, careful what you ask for, because you're going to have to learn quickly that that same thing that you're clamoring for that you know could be powerful, if not managed well, could actually have you sinking in it, right? So in Givelify, for example, over 100 employees scattered all over the world, different faiths and different backgrounds. I don't remember there was a point in time where, and now you use this specific story, there was a point in time, it was Black History Month, where a younger company, as a younger CEO, I was so focused on building the product, getting in front of the customer, and the entire Black History Month went by, and I did not make a single comment to the rest of the company about this. And so a lot of the African-American folks who worked at the company said, hey, Wale, we noticed Givelify's silence in Black History Month. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So busy trying to figure out everything else. That's such an important milestone. Just slipped me. And so the next year I promised to do better, right? Which we did. Well, guess what happens? We have a whole bunch of Asian folks on the team as well. And so Chinese New Year comes by and we were mute. And then they came to me and say, hey, Wale, we noticed that this happened. And many of us do recognize the Lunar New Year. We celebrate it, right? And would love to be part of helping Givelify understand what that means for us in the future. And so I had to invite them and say, okay, you know what, guys, we're going to be a lot more intentional about celebrating these things. And what truly happens is when you create a space where people can come and have those conversations with you and say, hey, this is important to me. And as a company, I want to see how I can bring that part of myself to the company and showcase this culture. I would dare say I've never developed the playbook. The people helped us develop the playbook that worked for them. And creating an environment where everybody feels like they can bring their whole authentic selves to the organization, regardless of their beliefs, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hindu, regardless of whatever your sexual orientation is, regardless of what part of the world you are in, it's just powerful. Because again, the solutions comes organically from the people. And all you have to do is lean into it, figure out how you're going to empower it, and figure out how to amplify it. Because diversity brings more diversity. And the better you are at harnessing it, the more it works for the organization.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing the story of that. Makes me also think we record this in March and it's Women's History Month. Make sure you don't miss that one.
So here's what's interesting. I was preparing to address the company, and there's a planning committee that helps me with those initiatives. We do this on a weekly basis. So it's a few women on the committee, and I said, hey, it's Women's History Month. I'd like to say something about Women's History Month. Could you all please just help me come up with some ideas? And they were like, no, Wale, we're not gonna let you come and mansplain Women's History Month to us. We got you covered. Relax, we'll take care of the programming, and we got you covered. But again, it goes to the power of creating this environment where people can have that kind of conversation with their leader. And look, don't make the mistake a lot of men do trying to do this, right? Because we can feel, we know pandering when we hear it, right? And how do you make it such an authentic experience? The people come together, they bring up these ideas on their own. And my job as the leader of the company is just to create an environment where these beautiful ideas can organically bubble up and we can lean into it. But yes, thank you very much for that reminder.
And while I just talked about mansplaining, now I know that everyone knows what this is, especially the women in the audience. But for those men that happen to be listening in here, the problem is most of you don't believe you're mansplaining. You believe you're just trying to be clear. And so one of the things you might do is pause for a second. Instead of trying to explain something that you feel like that someone might not know, don't assume and just ask. I don't know what it's about. Maybe it's, do you know how to change a tire? Don't assume that you need to give them the detail, because they may know exactly what they're doing. If you're oblivious to this, if it's a blind spot of yours, then you want to make sure that you're checking in with me. And I'm just bringing it out here. It is a fault of many men to just assume that people don't know what they're talking about, especially women, and they will just begin to jump into, here's what I'm talking about, and try to explain it to them. And it will get in the way of your relationship because people go home going, you won't believe what happened today. It happened again. Don't be that leader. Back to Wale. We've had an incredible conversation talking about diversity and inclusion driving growth. And I'm got to ask you, what have we not touched on? Because I feel like we've touched on a few of the things, but there's probably something else that's missing as it relates to creating that kind of growth with the diverse company that you have. What is that we need to touch on today?
I think one of the things that what I've heard when a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, Wally, we go to your About Us page on the Givelify.com website and we can see all the faces there. And this is what we're striving for, right? At Givelify, I say sometimes you go to our About Us page, it looks like the United Nations because of the different colors and shades of the people on that page. But the journey to getting there sometimes involves very intentional decisions that you have to make, right? It's decisions like I'm on the leadership team and I have all men and saying, hey, look, we have a couple of different positions that are opening up. That's our opportunity to add women to the leadership team. And when you start looking at the resumes and everything else that's coming up, staying true to that commitment that this is what I truly want, understanding that it might take you a little bit longer to fill that position. But the commitment to keep maintaining that kind of diversity in the workforce is hard work, right? And sometimes too many times I find myself in that situation where I'm like, okay, I have to fill this role like right now. And I'm seeing all of these other qualified candidates. What do I do? Do I take the shortcut or do I stay with something that we know for us as a company is truly important for our growth and our success and be a little bit patient? And there's somebody who I was having a conversation with the other day to talk about the speed of patience. And I think when you're thinking about building a very diverse workforce, it's one of those things that truly you have to lean into the speed of patience.
It's an interesting thing because most of the time patience is the slowest place, but yet the most powerful way to connect with someone. Where I see a lot of leaders within my coaching work is they have very little patience where they need more. When you think about your own leadership, what is the one thing that you're working on to improve that you're willing to share with us today to be a more inclusive leader and to really embrace the diversity inclusion to a new level?
Yeah. So the first question you asked, and I'll use that to connect that to the next question, Jane. I couldn't be much more emphatic about it's not just about bringing people from diverse background into the organization. It's about the work that you do from an employer brand as well. And I would argue that when it comes to branding, that some of the things that as an organization that you have to iron out as an employer brand is probably the most important thing because it seeps into the external facing brand, right? Your product brand. And things like being clear on what your purpose is, right, is for your employees, not for the people that you're selling products and services to. And when people are clear on what that common purpose is, and when they're clear on the promise that the brand is making, for Givelify, we know that doing good feels good. And for us, our purpose when we wake up every day is to ask ourselves that question, who else am I going to go empower to feel good today, right? I'm going to empower them to feel good by doing good. And for us, the promise we make to the world, again, these are very internal facing brand elements, which is that innate desire to do good that exists in every human being. We're going to effortlessly pursue everything it makes it to make it so easy to turn it into acts of kindness and generosity. And when you have things like that and you provide guardrails, and there's something that Givelify we call our 4 keys, which helps with decision making. Again, this is key things when you have people from diverse backgrounds to try to understand how do we all align on something, on one common goal. All right, so we call it the 4 keys, and it's in the order of importance. Our most important key, which for us is the non-negotiable, is integrity. All right. If you check the box on integrity, now you got to ask yourself the next question. In this decision I'm about to make, where's the heart? Because in every decision we make, a heartbeat is impacted by it. So you got to look for the heart. If you check the box on that, go the extra mile to keep it simple. And if you can check the box on those 3 things, get into a place where you're delivering wow, it's not as hard. So to try to connect the dots between how do you harness diversity with your employer brand and what's the next step of that? As leaders, nothing could be more uncertain than, you do everything that you can to make sure that when you're inviting somebody into your company to be part of the mission, that you've made the best decision, right? And sometimes you don't always make that right decision when it comes to that. And you're like, man, I wish there was more I could have done, right, to get that right. But the truth of the matter is, we started this conversation earlier about giving yourself permission to make some mistakes so you can learn from them, right? You talked about your $3 million mistake. And I think for me also is like being able to get to that place where I could say, it's okay. I learned a big lesson from that. And because of that, I've become a better leader. And being able to forgive oneself. I think it's something that, as a very competitive person, it's something that I have to constantly remind myself. When I get it wrong, it stings. And I could get to a very funky place. And trying to get myself out of that is something that I continue to work on. And there's a book called Extreme Ownership that I really appreciate a lot. And you talked about what's that journey there, just being able to own yourself in those moments, your decision, and understanding that you're responsible for whatever decisions you make and how you get yourself out of it when it's not the right one. It's something that I continue to challenge myself with every day.
Great way to wrap this up. Wale, thank you for sharing your wisdom here.
Thank you.
What a powerful conversation. I love this conversation about diversity and inclusion. D&I drives growth. When you think about your own journey as a leader, my hope is that you're embracing hiring others that aren't like you. I'm not saying that you don't have the same values, because that's important, but you want to make sure that you're seeking out diversity and inclusion as you can begin to scale your company. Because when you get to a certain point, it gets harder to add in the other colors, the other sexes, the other sexual orientations, whatever it may be. You want to make sure that you are embracing this as you grow forward. My hope is that this has helped you see the power of that. When you think about your own journey as a leader, make sure you continue to check in on the podcast, continue to push forward, and anything I can do to help you, make sure you reach out. When you think of growth and you think of leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.